And we are live. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hey.
Hi, Kathleen. Hi,
Hello.
everybody. We are live with DictionBuddy one-on-one. And it's a very special guest that we have, Kathleen Roland-Silverstein. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. We're just going to take a second to let people in, and we can start our conversation for today's topic about singing in Swedish, one of Scandinavian languages. And honestly, for many, and dare I speak that, is a mystery. So we're going to uncover secrets of singing in Swedish today with Kathleen.
Great.
We are also very happy to see anybody who will join us, and please ask questions. We welcome any feedback because this is really dialogue. We wanted to have a dialogue with singers, with coaches, and with viewers. Just a few words about DictionBuddy and why we do this. Three singers came together and created DictionBuddy, and it's really a tool, a mobile app that exists on Apple and Google platform that allows singers to listen to audio tracks recorded by native speakers in different languages for the purpose of learning music repertoire, vocal repertoire. So far, we have 10 languages already on the platform. We're very happy to introduce new languages, and hopefully we will have Scandinavian languages on the platform very soon. And so this live cast really preempts that plan that we have. So why don't we begin?
Great.
Kathleen, allow me to say a few words about you. And I would appreciate your perspective on your journey. But let me just preface by saying that Kathleen is a well-known scholar, highly regarded concert soloist and specialist in the music of the 20th and 21st century, and a specialist in Swedish language. She has been featured as a singer with Santa Fe Chamber Music Festival, Britten-Pears Institute, and Tanglewood Music Festival. She has also appeared as an award-winning Grammy artist with Southern Chamber Music Society of Los Angeles and the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra at Disney Hall and Hollywood Bowl. Fantastic person, scholar, and Fulbright scholar, also an American Scandinavian Foundation grantee. So you have so many accolades, and currently you are with Syracuse University, right, Kathleen?
Correct. Yeah, I'm at the Setner School of Music in Syracuse, where I've been for 9 years now.
Wow, wonderful. They're lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Would you, I mean, it's such a long journey from the vocalist yourself coming into the education realm and choosing Swedish. Would you speak a little bit how really you came into this?
Sure. And this is just a demonstration of how education as a singer and a scholar continues your whole life, because the whole Swedish thing for me actually didn't happen until after I finished my doctorate in 1997. And that was at University of Southern California. Shortly thereafter, my husband had a Fulbright scholarship. He's in gerontology and sociology. So he was in Stockholm in 1999. And I had finished my degree. I was doing singing, teaching. I went and joined him back and forth between my gigs in Stockholm, where I learned to fall in love with the language, fall in love with the music. I made some lifelong friendships and collaborative partnerships with musicians there that really just changed my life. So then after that, I got my first American Scandinavian Foundation grant in 2002. brought my baby daughter and my husband back, where I started my research. Then I had a Fulbright, of course, to Stockholm in 2007. So 2007, yes. And then after that, I got another grant from American Scandinavian Foundation in 2016, when I was on my first sabbatical from Syracuse University. While I was there, I thought I'd learn some Swedish songs, and I ended up forming a collaborative partnership with Katarina Strömhari, a pianist at the Musikhögskolan in Stockholm, and with her husband, Stefan Hari, this incredible clarinetist. And we have gone back and forth. We've done recordings of Libby Larsen, the American song composer. We've done a lot of Swedish stuff. Katarina was really my first coach on Swedish art song. And then I've just been going back and forth almost every year, getting my spoken Swedish up to snuff, and learning about the special rules for Swedish diction and singing. And after I finished my book, and it was published by Germans Musikverlag in 2013, I then got really intrigued with the art song of Sibelius, most of whose songs, although he was a Finn, most of his songs are Swedish song settings. And it wasn't until after my sabbatical in 2016 that I discovered, not from my Swedish colleagues, but from my Finnish friends, that, hey, singing in Swedish for a Finnish composer, different kind of Swedish, and you have to know that. And when I mentioned this to some of my Swedish colleagues, they said, that they can't be. What are you saying? And the Finns would say, how like the Swedes to ignore the fact that Finnish Swedish is different from Swedish Swedish.
We definitely need to talk about this, but I wanted to, because some serious clarification is needed, especially for singers who are about to learn or are learning Sibelius songs, especially, right? I wanted to put right on the screen the name of your book, so whoever would like to check it out, it's called Romanza, 25 Swedish Songs, and it's actually on DictionBuddy website. You are our Swedish diction expert, and your resources are listed there, and we're going to talk about resources more. So you finished this, you mentioned, 2013?
Yes.
Are you working on anything right now related to another edition, or?
Yes, well, I do hope eventually to do a second volume of those songs, but right now I have a publisher, and as we say in Swedish, hålla tummar, hold your thumbs, cross your fingers. Hopefully this publisher is going to publish my newest book, which is a performance guide to the songs of Jean Sibelius. And in that book, I've got some really interesting information, not only the 3-line translations that singers are accustomed to using, but a guide to singing in Finnish, a guide to singing in Finnish Swedish, and a discussion of all the poets and the singers. One thing that's very interesting that I did not know till I began this research is that Black American singer Marian Anderson was actually a favorite of Sibelius and met with him and recorded some of his songs, and he loved her. So
interesting. So is it the Sibelius that you have to be really careful, which diction to use, or is that?
Absolutely.
You mentioned that he used the Finnish poet, and that's basically the reason for that.
Well, it's just that at that period, up until just the turn of the century into the 1800s, Finland was ruled by Sweden. So everything, their poetry, their culture, their government, their schools, everything was conducted in Swedish. But it was Swedish of that particular period, what we might call högsvenska now, which is like Hochdeutsch. It's a particular kind of approach to the diction that is very idiomatic and has some sounds in it that we don't hear in contemporary Swedish. And when a Finn listens to a Swedish singer sing the songs of Sibelius, they very much hear those differences and kind of go, well, it's good, but not really Finnish Swedish.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman who is a violinist who speaks Finnish Swedish, Frida Bachman, was a woman I met in England when I was there on sabbatical in 2016, who introduced me to this concept and to the whole idea of Finnish Swedish being ever so slightly different from Swedish Swedish, and how important it is to include it when you're singing the songs of Sibelius.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important to actually go to the source, to specialists like you who know the differences, because when you go on a big stage and you perform, you are expected to know those details. And if nobody tells you that, how would you know? You will learn a piece thinking that it's okay, Swedish composers, so I'll pronounce it in Swedish, without knowing such a specific detail that you actually have to consider.
Right.
So I'm really happy that you bring this to people's attention. Syracuse students must be very, very knowledgeable in this by now.
Well, I've had a lot of students who have planned and programmed Swedish songs, Sibelius and Swedish composers on their recitals. Mm-hmm. And it's been really fun, their openness to this repertoire, when they find out, hey, it's actually not really more difficult than learning a song in German. Yeah, and certainly, in my view, easier than learning songs in Russian, because it's my weakest knowledge base is Russian literature.
So for, in terms of your existing book, and you also mentioned you're writing another one right now, right? Mm-hmm. So is it just going to be a compilation of songs, or there's something else in there, translation that you put in?
Right. In the new book, The Performance Guide to the Songs of Jean Sibelius, mm-hmm. I will have 3-line song translations like we see in all other books. Like I said, a discussion of the poets and the singers, provenance, a discussion of the background of these different songs, because frankly, when people sing the songs of Sibelius, they basically, in my experience, because people come to me for coaching on these songs, they basically sing the same handful of like 3 or 4 songs. Var det en dröm, flickan kom ifrån sin älsklingsmöte, svarta rosor, maybe a couple of våren flyktig hastar. Just beautiful, fabulous songs, mostly from his middle period. But wow, he has a huge compositional rainbow mm-hmm. of things that he passed through. Expressionist music, very almost minimalist, more spare. He never used folk song idioms in his songs, but there is a lot of Kalevala, of Finnish epic storytelling, mm-hmm. Trochaic tetrameter, poetic forms in his music. Mm-hmm. So his music is extremely varied. And that's what I love about working on this book right now. And then I have 2 colleagues in Finland, one fabulous singer who's on the faculty at Sibelius Academy, Margareta Brandt, and she's doing all the Finnish spoken recordings of the song texts for me. And then the violinist I mentioned earlier, Frida Bachman, is doing all of the Finnish-Swedish spoken links for me for the songs. Mm-hmm. So when the book is published, singers will also be able to hear that text as it's spoken, which is always really, really helpful.
Yeah, and we will talk a little bit more about specifics and the songs and the pronunciation. But before we do that, I think it would be wonderful to actually listen to one song that you previously mentioned that's very famous and often performed by singers. So let me see, I prepared the link that you said, and I think it's important to just kind of listen and see what we can do. Just 1 second. Oh boy, I hope, can you see this? Can you see my screen, or you really?
I can.
I can see. Yeah, but that's the wrong one. Somehow I'm not sharing the right screen.
While you're looking for that, do you want me to describe the song?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. This song, as I mentioned before, Flickan kom ifrån sin älsklingsmöte. There are a lot of songs in all sing literature where a story is told of a dialogue between a mother and a daughter. Okay. And so this mother and daughter are having a discussion because the daughter keeps returning from these late night meetings with reddened lips or with pale cheeks or with, just looking distressed. And she has a lot of different, reasons for why she's looking a little mussed up. And then at the end, she finally confesses to her mother, I've been, when my lips were all red, when my cheeks are pale, all of this happened because I was meeting my lover. And in the end, he turned out to be a bad guy and has betrayed me. And there are two very famous settings of this song. One is by Sibelius, which he wrote after he heard Wilhelm Stenhammar's version of the song. They're very different treatments of the same song text.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm still trying to figure this out. To be honest, it should have worked. It actually worked before, but I guess I'm technically challenged right now. I apologize for that. I wanted to actually show you the video, and let me see. What if I actually post it? No. Okay. Well, here is.
And is this the one with Anna Sophie von Otter singing it?
Yes, that's the one.
Singer.
That's the one. Let me try it again. Maybe I can.
Yeah.
Maybe I can figure it out right now. Just 1 second.
And there is a little demonstration in this song of a difference between Finnish Swedish and Swedish Swedish. The word for cheeks, which the cheeks get a lot of attention in this song because the daughter is either pale from her betrayal or her cheeks are red because she was just kissing her boyfriend. In Swedish Swedish, that word is kinder, cheeks. In Finnish Swedish, it's kinder. So it's a slight difference, but it makes a difference to a Finn hearing the song.
Gotcha. So I think I figured it out. So why don't? So she's singing it with the correct pronunciation, right? She's singing it with the Finnish.
I think Anna Sophie von Otter is singing it in Swedish Swedish. You can't really blame it because she is a Swede and she's a fabulous artist, but she's not a Finn. So
I understand. Okay, let's try to listen to it right now. I think we got it. There you go. Wow.
Yeah, gorgeous.
It's beautiful. It's,
Yeah.
it's such an interesting combination of lyricism in the beginning and drama.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All
And
in
Steinhammer does a fabulous job with this narrative, just, tracking melodically and harmonically the girl's denials to her mother when she comes home from meeting her lover, and then when she loses it at the end. It's just fabulous. And unlike Sibelius's songs, which tend to not have preludes or postludes, there's a big prelude, big postlude, beautifully done by these performers. Bengt Forsberg, her pianist, is one of the leading interpreters of Scandinavian art song.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it's beautiful. So speaking of singers and songs, right? So practically, Kofi actually had a fantastic question, and I would like to show it to you. I think that would be really helpful if you would address it.
Oh, sure. If right away, I think there are some song cycles. I mean, some composers who have written things for very specific voice types, like in any other genre. Ture Rangström was a early 20th century composer who wrote these songs called Kung Eriks Visor that are really great for baritone. Fabulous songs for baritone that are songs about an actual king who was sort of mad in the 16th century. Wonderful for baritone. Sibelius actually has a couple of wonderful songs for high or even a coloratura soprano. One is called Jubal, which is about the biblical story about the swan that is supposed to be the origin of music, the swan that rises up and is killed with an arrow. And then also his song Enslenda, which is about a dragonfly. Both of those songs are wonderful for lighter voice or for a voice that likes to move. There's so
about the swan. What was the name? I think there was some.
That's called Jubal. Jubal. And a lot of what they call in Swedish song visor. Visa is the singular, visor is plural. And these are songs that are almost, when we think of the ballads of, say, Carl Löö or Schumann or Schubert, Ökönig, things like that, that are ballads. Same thing exists in Swedish song, visor, and those are really wonderful for male voice. Sibelius tends to write a lot of fantastic repertoire for sort of the beefier kind of voice. Birgit Nilsson, of course, as beefy as they came, sang a lot of his songs. Kirsten Flagstad as well.
Would you spell, please, the name of the composer you mentioned for the baritone?
For the baritone, that's Rangström. That's Rangstro Rangström is one of my absolute favorite composers. I'm thinking one of my next books will be about his songs. And because he was actually a singer who studied with Julius Hay, a famous voice teacher in Germany. Mm-hmm. And he used something that in Swedish we call it språkets melodi, the melody of speech. Mm-hmm. And it was sort of akin to the way Debussy treated text in French melody differently than composers before him. So with Rangström, we see a real move towards embracing the music, the tonality of Swedish art song.
It's so wonderful that you actually made that transition. Thank you so much, Kofi, for the question, and thank you, Kathleen, for making that transition into the next question that I was about to ask you. You mentioned the traditional languages, right? Italian and French, and the operatic and art song traditional style. And so, what about Swedish composers? You touched on it briefly, but how did they embrace it? Did they create something of their own? Would you speak to us a little bit about that?
Well, I think Swedish composers have always been adept at doing song settings from other languages. Even, Emily Dickinson is a favorite of some contemporary Swedish composers. But I think with Rangström at the beginning of the 20th century, Swedes began to embrace their own language and the way that their language would shape the melodies and the harmonies that the composer would choose. Because I think up until then, with Stenhammar and another, Petersson Berge, who were big late 19th century Swedish composers, there might have been a little bit more, they would have been more akin perhaps to their German contemporaries. But with Rangström, you see all these other Swedish composers starting to move towards embracing and using the melody of the Swedish language, because it definitely is a tonal language.
Understood. Thank you. Very good. So I think that you actually sent me some information on pronunciation, and I'd like to share. Why don't we look into that to show this? All right. So this. Okay. So this is a little bit about the book that you mentioned, and here's the composer that we've been just talking about. Right? Can you see it?
Yep.
Yeah, wonderful. And so you also mentioned these composers. Would you speak a little bit more about those?
Yes, Bo Linda, wonderful mid-20th to the 70s Swedish composer who unfortunately committed suicide and cut short his life, his compositions. But he has some wonderful songs that really take some of the Swedish folk element and weave it into his songs. Frumeri, Gunnar Frumeri, was a composer who taught a lot of composers. He was early 20th century. A lot of composers coming after him studied with Frumeri. And probably his most famous song cycle is Nio Sånger, 9 songs. And he actually says in the introduction to the songs, these are not to be sung with talade svenska, spoken Swedish, contemporary Swedish, but in högsvenska, in more high Swedish, proper Swedish, some might even say archaic Swedish. And his music's a very impressionistic sounding, I think you would describe it as.
such wisdom that singers, who are serious about researching the music and serious about approaching diction, they would know, right? And unless you really do that kind of work, you don't have that information that you need. You really need to observe that. Like we study the role, and that's the same study that should go into the art song. So what you're saying is just so valuable and so wonderful to know. I'd like to move, excuse me, to this one.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, if you could speak a little bit so that.
Sure.
Mhm.
I like to tell people, because those of you who might remember either watching it on YouTube or watching in the 90s, Saturday Night Live, they had it, and it might have been on the a children's show as well, but the Swedish chef, which was a puppet who would sort of sing and speak in Swedish. And I'm telling you, all my Swedish friends hate this puppet because that's how Americans perceive the tonality, the song-like quality, the singing quality of Swedish. Hörna, förna, skurna. I should have put a clip from the Swedish chef on there, but he's not too far off, because there is a song-like quality to Swedish, and people ignore that at their peril. They will not sound Swedish if they don't understand that tonality of Swedish. They have something in Swedish called acute accent and grav accent, accent 1 and accent 2. Accent 1 is for most one syllable substantive nouns, and accent 2 gives a person 2 stresses on a word. So for example, the word for dream in Swedish, dröm, is accent 1. The word for dreams in Swedish, drömmar. So you've got a down, up accent. That's really important to observe, even though the composer does that work. Yes, of course, the composer does that work for you. But if you're conscious that it's not drömmar, if you're conscious that it's drömmar with a second accent going up, your Swedish is going to sound much more authentic. So it's important to know. And in my book, Romancer, I am careful to put all of those designations in so that people will know which words are accent 1, which ones are accent 2. So, and of course, in so many languages, the idea of lip rounding is really important. There are vowels in Swedish which must be done with the lips rounded. And there is one vowel in Swedish. It drove me crazy when I was first learning the language. But I read a wonderful book, Uttalsboken by Rosqvist, that had actual ideas about how to make these very difficult sounds for non-Swedish speakers, and had a link to it so that you could hear the sound. Okay, so the vowel that made me crazy, but you can learn it, is in the word you in Swedish, du, du. And the way Rosenqvist described this, he said, if you put your lips in the position you need to whistle the highest tone that you can, I can barely whistle, very high, then you will have the position you need for that vowel in Swedish. Du. So lips in the position for a very high whistle tone, and there you go. You're good to go with that particularly idiomatic Swedish sound.
Interesting. So while we're talking about the resources and we're here, you put together a wonderful list. Maybe we can just kind of show it to people so that they can explore if they'd like.
Right. Seth Keaton, who is the manager and creator of Song Helix. I keep on sharing this with people when people say, I want to make a recital that is about mothers and children. You go on Song Helix and look at the art song resources. He has tremendous ways to find all these songs. And he asked me, and I've been adding to it as I go along on my Sibelius book. On the Sibelius part of Song Helix website, I have all this information about who premiered the song, what is the song about, where can we find the song, where can we find translations, what opus is it from, etc. Mimi Fulmer, my friend and Finnish expert, created the Midnight Sun Collected Songs from Finland, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. 3 volumes with subito music, and there's a listening component that goes with that. And I did all the Swedish IPA translations for that book, but Mimi is a real expert at Scandinavian languages. Another expert, I think the 3 of us are considered the people that know this stuff. Mimi Fulmer, Anna Hersey, and me. Anna Hersey wrote this wonderful book that I use all the time, Scandinavian Song, A Guide to Swedish, Norwegian, and Danish Repertoire and Diction. Doesn't have Finnish in it, but that's because that's a whole different enchilada. So her book is really, really fabulous, well-researched, well-organized. Sibelius One is a website. You have to become a member, I think, to access most of it, but it is an extraordinary resource. They're always updating the discography for that. So it's really incredible. And they have all of the translations for all of his songs, as well as really interesting articles about the songs. The next is the solo songs with orchestra. I mean, this is the urtext. This is the official collections of songs by Breitkopf and Hertel of all of the Sibelius songs, the ones with orchestra, the ones with solo piano, the ones that were published with no opus numbers, and it's got tremendous background information for all the songs. So if you want a really authentic with the correct text written in and backgrounds of all the songs, that is it.
Wonderful. That's a great rundown. You also added some more.
Yeah, these are for the languages. Singing in Swedish and singing in Finnish is actually published in Finland. So I think it's to be taken with a grain of salt, because the singing in Swedish one really comes from the point of view of a Finnish speaker of Swedish. So it's going to be slightly different. The singing in Finnish book is got a lot of 3-line translations of all different composers, not just Sibelius, Merikanto, Rautavaara, a lot of wonderful Finnish composers, and an explanation of, kind of a deep dive into learning about singing Finnish diction. This book, Sing It in Finnish, Practical and Helpful Guide, including a down and dirty guide to Finnish pronunciation, is a really fun and easy, quick introduction to singing in Finnish. And then these 3 articles, and Journal of Singing, besides the article that I wrote about romancer, romancing the romancer, these 3 articles, Finnish Lyric Diction, How Singable is Finnish, and Anna Hersey's An Introduction to Swedish Diction, all of those are really, really helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You also put together, this one. We listened to this, of course, to the song. And you also said that the right way would be to really consider the Finnish aspect to the diction rather than just sing it with a Swedish pronunciation. That would be the ideal, but is it generally accepted that both are okay for singers, or what is the perspective from the community?
Karita Mattila, who sings the Sibelius version, Karita is, of course, Finnish. So her diction is going to be different from Anne-Sophie von Otter's diction. There are certain things about singing in Finnish Swedish that are a little bit easier for English speakers, because in Swedish, they have 2 different kinds of ah, for example. So they have a bright ah and a very dark ah. The word for I in Swedish is jag, lip rounded, very dark, ah, jag. It's not the same in Finnish Swedish, it's just jag.
Wow, it's quite different, actually.
Yeah. And some sounds that are very difficult for English speakers in Swedish just are not there in Finnish Swedish. So that makes our job a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
But when you listen to these two songs, not only are they very different settings of the same text,
Mm-hmm.
but you will hear a Swedish singer and a Finnish singer singing the same text, and you'll notice differences.
Wow. And you also put together this list, which I think would be helpful for anybody really starting to embark on Swedish songs, really.
Mm-hmm.
Which of this you think should be tackled first, and for what voice?
Well, the Opus 13 is really good for any voice,
Mm-hmm.
really any voice, male, female, high, low. There are a few different transpositions. Sibelius was okay with transpositions of his songs. So you can find, if something doesn't suit your voice, you can find a transposition higher or lower, or just create that. Opus 13 was considered his first song cycle, using the poems of Reinbert, who was considered the most important Finnish poet of the emerging Finnish culture and country in the 19th century. And all of the poems in Opus 13 are by Reinbert. In Opus 90, his last song cycle, also just the poems of Reinbert. He loved Reinbert, and he set, I think, at least 25 of his songs. That Opuses 36, 37, 38, when people bring these songs to me to coach or they perform them, these are the middle period. They're gorgeous, they're big, there's orchestral versions, there's solo song with piano versions. They're wonderful, but I always want to encourage people to explore all the other opuses of his songs, which are amazing. My favorite is Opus 57 with the poetry by Ernst Josefsson, who was schizophrenic Swedish Jewish poet and wrote these amazing poems that Sibelius used in Opus 57. I included at the end of that Gerald Finley, the Canadian baritone who did orchestral version of his song Näcken, which is about a mythical being in Finnish culture. And it really showcases Sibelius's expressionistic compositional technique.
This is just a wonderful rundown, Kathleen. First question from a singer. I personally have not looked into this type of music before, and from Scandinavian composers. And if I wanted to embark on it as a new singer, have not had experience with that, what would be your recommendation? How to really approach this with so many resources, so many recordings, such wonderful selection?
Yeah, I would say, not just because it's my book, but I had a lot of help putting my book on Romancer together.
Mm-hmm.
When I was initially doing my research, I came up with about 200 songs, and it would be like any singer from another country coming to the United States and saying, where do I start with American art song? I mean, tell them, right? So I had lunch one day with Lennart Hedvall and Thomas Schubach, who are two amazing composers, artists, scholars, two of the top in Scandinavia. And we were having lunch and I said, gosh, guys, I have this list of like 200 songs I've been researching, but I can't put them all in my first book. And they said, all right, Kathleen, you have your herring appetizer there and just concentrate on that. And we're going to go through. And they actually made an A, B, and C list for me. And over the years, the wisdom of their choices has been totally borne out to me the more I've learned about this genre. But my book is essentially list A, the most important composers and songs that with whom you should get familiar as you're exploring this repertoire. And then you can do a deeper dive depending on these composers, and if you want to look at more contemporary 21st century Swedish composers. Sibelius, I think, just starting with his first song cycle, Opus 13, and then just kind of going around and see what speaks to you. There is a certain aspect of Sibelius's compositional oeuvre which is extraordinary, and it really expresses Kalevala, the epic poetry of the Finnish culture, where we see something we do not see in German lieder, we don't see in any other art song. Mm-hmm. Songs like Höstkväll, På verandan, things that actually sound almost like, you know, I think of Beowulf with this epic, you know, expression of a story that is told in a very unique manner. Looking at any of those songs by Sibelius is a real education in doing more of a deep dive into his songs than just the handful of Opus 36 through 38 songs. And of course, he did do one song cycle, Opus 50, in all German texts. So one can definitely dig in there for Sibelius.
Understood. Yeah, thank you so much. If anybody would like to ask a question, please feel free. It's a very interesting topic, and certainly Kathleen is absolutely the right person to answer if you are embarking on this journey of learning any Sibelius songs or any other songs by Swedish or Finnish, right, composers. Mm-hmm. In terms of Finnish composers, who do you think would be appropriate as an introduction into the Finnish art? Of
course, song? We all know about, most of us know about Kilpinen, who's a fabulous Finnish song composer, very prolific. Rautavaara, who died recently, fantastic, another one. Early 20th century through the middle, Merikanto, really fantastic stuff. I'm discovering now a lot of Finnish repertoire of the late 20th and early 21st century. I have a couple of wonderful colleagues, an American pianist who's been at the Sibelius Academy for 30 plus years, Colin Hansen, and my friend Frida Bachmann, the violinist, and we've done a number of concerts together. Before the pandemic hit, I was in Finland and we were planning a recording with some contemporary Finnish composers, and hopefully we'll be able to get back to that when travel opens up again. It's very frustrating, but yeah. I mean, I was working on my book when I was in Helsinki last March, and my husband and I had to run home when we were told that the country's borders would be closed and American citizens might not be able to get back in. So I spent the rest of that March through September on my butt on my sofa doing all the translations for my book. So it wasn't a complete waste of time, but really looking forward to getting back to singing that stuff.
Yes, we all do. It's coming. Yeah. Wonderful. I actually had another question. Mm-hmm. So are you open to working with students, with singers, and helping them with their diction?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've done master classes at Tanglewood, Manhattan School of Music, USC, Eastman. I usually go back every year to Eastman and do a master class working with students on that repertoire. And I've also worked at helping students, singers, prepare auditions using Scandinavian repertoire abroad. So I love, that's something I love to do. So if anybody did want to talk to me about, preparing something like that, I'd be happy to meet with them on Zoom and CleanFeed.
Wonderful. I posted your website. So if anybody has interest in exploring and working with Kathleen on the Sibelius repertoire or any other music by Swedish or Finnish composers, please feel free, or inviting Kathleen to give a masterclass. I think it's a very rare niche in the area of diction, and Scandinavian music deserves the attention with among other music that we all know and love. So once again, I invite if anybody has any comments or questions to please ask Kathleen. I just wanted to thank you. I think it's such an interesting journey into the realm that is not. Let me word it right. The light had not been shown on it brightly enough, I think, unless you are specifically digging into that kind of music and that kind of side of the world geographically, or you've been invited to sing in one of those countries, then I guess your interest naturally lies. But otherwise, how often do you see singers actually perform songs by Sibelius in auditions?
Often if they're asked to include something that's outside of German, French, Italian, they will go to Sibelius. And like I said, they'll usually do those 4 or 5 songs that I mentioned. But it's quite wonderful to hear a singer offer something by Sibelius that is from his other opuses. I don't know if you have time or wanted to play that final selection from Höstkväll, sung by Flagstad, which is a really typical big old song with orchestra.
Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can find it. I do have. Carita Matila link. I'm not sure if we actually have.
It's on that final page, or next to the final page, right before singers. Höstkväll by Flagstad. I also included Näcken, the recording by Gerald Finley. He worked with one of the prime coaches of this repertoire in Finland, Gustav Jupp-Schubaka, who's been a tremendous help to me in my research as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I would treat yourself. Listen to Höstkväll, autumn evening is the translation, sung by Birgit Nilsson or by Flagstad, so you get an idea of that quality that comes across in Sibelius that you don't hear anywhere else, and that is that real epic, deep Finnish character that identifies the song as being by nobody else but Jean Sibelius.
I would like to actually put the spelling of what you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
That. Would you please spell it?
It's H-O umlaut, S-T,
Mm-hmm.
K-V-A umlaut, L-L.
Mm-hmm. Does it look right to you?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see if we can actually, well, I think we're not going to take the time, but if you recommend this, I think it could be a wonderful session for somebody in the journey of listening to this music.
Yes. If you have a big voice and you want to sing something big and wonderful and incredibly expressive and unlike anything you've ever sung before, this is the song for you.
And it's regardless of the voice, is it?
Well, some of the songs that Sibelius wrote, he wrote for very specific singers. And this is one of the ones that really cannot be sung by a light voice. It's more for a dramatic voice. Mm-hmm. Like his song with orchestra, Luonatar, which is another, nothing like it. It's absolutely unbelievable and fiendishly difficult to sing, but incredible. It's a real epic story.
Let me just do that one as well.
Okay. Luonnotar. Is that right?
Let's see. Does this look right for you?
That is, he wrote it for Aino Akte, who was a singer who was, I believe, the first Salome at Covent Garden. And she was really mad at Sibelius because she wanted him to write an opera, which he never did. And so this is as close as he got to writing an operatic scena for anybody, was Luonatar. it's an incredible piece. And it, like I said, it is fiendishly difficult, but wow, life-changing.
And you mentioned that, so she was a soprano, I bet?
Yes.
Okay, dramatic.
Yeah. And strangely enough, if anybody is a Tintin fan, you know, the Tintin comic books, I know Octay was apparently the inspiration for the opera singer in the Tintin comic books.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So wonderful. We have a couple of suggestions of repertoire for dramatic voices.
Mm-hmm.
And we also talked about other songs appropriate for other voices. So I think we basically gave people a starting point.
Yes. Yeah.
Wonderful. I so much appreciate your time, Kathleen, today. Your wisdom and knowledge and sharing it with us is very much needed for the community of singers. As I hope that as things open up more and more, we are going to hear more music sung in Swedish. And if anybody needs help coaching those, please reach out to Kathleen. She is the right person for you, and here's her contact. Yes?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you again for your time, and we are happy to answer any questions you guys may have. Even after this, if you'd like any recommendation, you know, you can find Kathleen's information and her book on our website, DictionBuddy.com.
And by the way, I'm just going to say that the book, of course, I have it, but also Glendower, get it from Glendower, Classical Vocal Reprints, carries my book. He also carries the really fabulous collection by my publisher, this one, Svenska Romanser, which is, I think, about 200 songs, all Swedish songs. It's not aimed at the English speakers, so there are no translations, but a lot of those songs are in my book, or you can find the translations online. Svenska Romanser by Germans is a fantastic resource, and you can also get that from Classical Vocal Reprints.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Kathleen, again, I appreciate your time and sharing all this wonderful guidance for the singers to delve into the wonderful music of Sibelius. And we are happy to share this hour with anybody who joined and who will listen to us later.
Great.
Till next time.
All right.
Wonderful
Thank
Sunday.
you.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey,
Okay. Bye-bye.